So Bitcoin's a very interesting creature, and it's a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But I like to boil it down to kind of three perspectives. First, Bitcoin is disruptive to gold for the reasons we've just laid out. It's more divisible, durable, recognizable, portable, and scarce. Another way to consider, another aspect of that is that it's much more securable than gold. So historically, gold had to be centralized inside warehousing operations to make it economically feasible to use. And that's what dollars actually started out as. They were warehouse receipts for gold. So you knew you could take this paper slip back to the warehouse operator, redeem it for gold. And very quickly, the market figured out that it was easier to transact these paper slips as money than the physical gold itself, so long as that trust function, that one-to-one relationship of paper slip to gold was not violated. Over time, this led to the centralization of gold because it increased the economics of settlement, right? If I can keep all the gold in one warehouse operation and we can transact in the paper slips widely, then the transaction cost is basically crushed to nil. The problem with this, of course, is that it introduced a significant level of trust necessary for market participants in the warehouse operator. And these warehouse operators eventually became banks, and these banks evolved to become central banks, which are controlled by governments. So that takes us to kind of another aspect to consider Bitcoin, is that it's kind of like an automated central bank. So central bank is the institution built up around gold, essentially, where they control the real money. And then they're issuing what was originally money redeemable for gold, now is just this uncollateralized government debt certificate to market participants, and basically forcing market participants to use this inferior money while they hoard free market selected superior money, gold. And the central bank has basically three functions. It's supposed to facilitate international value flows. It needs to establish account balances, so it has to reconcile those flows over time. And then it's supposed to maintain monetary policy, which monetary policy is an interesting one because the supply of money on the free market is not a matter of policy. It's a matter of supply and demand dynamics, right? So essentially, as societies became more productive, that productivity surplus, whatever couldn't be put to a higher and better use than gold mining, would be used to mine gold. So gold sort of became this economic residual of the division of labor, essentially. And central banks are just an institution that have been built up around gold to control economic flows, to try and control populations. It really is a mechanism for siphoning wealth off of productive people. And we see that it's been taken to an extreme today, where we have most governments in the world running massive deficits. And we have to ask ourselves, every deficit is someone else's surplus, right? So the surplus of productive people is being harvested by the deficits of governments via this institution we call the central bank. And that's why I really think it's an unsustainable business model. Which brings us to kind of our third aspect of what Bitcoin is that it's basically a peaceful protest against economic tyranny. That's what a monopoly is, right? It's a monopoly saying I have the right, by whatever means necessary, to deny the preferences of my customers to serve my own interests. They're not accountable to the market. They're not pricing things according to the market. The preferences of their customers do not influence their design and production decisions. And so I think kind of in Western civilization, we've acknowledged that in most industries, but we have, kind of due to human nature, we've been unable to let go of the market for money. And there's something really deep here, actually. I think that I consider words and prices to be categorical comparatives. These are instruments we're using to perceive, contrast, and communicate the world around us, right? In interpersonal dialogue, we're using words, but in economies, they're using price signals to signify sort of the demand and supply fluctuations. And as we learned in the 20th century, free speech is a necessary check on despotism. We've got to have words free of censorship in order to keep the state in check, basically. And as I believe we're going to learn in the 21st century, undistorted prices are necessary for peaceful cooperation. We've got to have economic coordination free of central bank coercion in order for the world economy to function adequately. And I would argue that all the symptoms and manifestations of global debt to GDP at 350%, these are symptoms of this fiat currency endgame that we are in. It's very easy to think that the paper money we use and government issuance and control of it is the norm. But if you look at it over a broader scale of 5,000 years, 4,900 years we had free market selected money. Only the past 100 or so have we had this super distorted global experiment called fiat currency.